Hello friends, Dr. Reese Goodall here, and thank you for joining me for this next video. Today we're going to be thinking about essay structure, how to do it and why you should do it to improve your mark and your writing. So we begin with essentially the question of why bother with essay structure whatsoever? Why bother thinking about how you're going to organise the logic and the material of your work? And really it is a fundamental skill, and it's one that can really uplift a good essay into sort of a great essay. And it's quite fundamentally, it's an easy skill to learn in the sense that you don't need to know the material as much as you do sort of understand the logic of how to present it. And presenting is a skill, and you will get marks for knowing the content. You'll get marks for sort of your arguments, but you'll get marks for things like readability and cohesion, and and a lot of that comes down to how you organise an essay, how you sort of put the pieces together, how you make an argument that builds and develops and makes as strong a case as possible. And that is why you want to think about sort of the structural logic of an essay, is because they're sort of easy marks to pick up, and if you can do it well, it really, really makes your writing stand out. So where you begin is with the logistical stuff of an essay. And what do I mean by that? And fundamentally, it's reading the rubric of a task. It's reading the instructions and knowing exactly what you're being asked to do. So are you being asked just to write an essay plain and simple, responding to a list of questions? Are you being asked to write a report? Are you being asked to take a particular stance? Whatever it is, knowing exactly sort of the structure that you have to adhere to. Um, will definitely influence the shape of the work that you produce. Alongside that, there's also a question of word count. How many words are you allowed in the task? Because what you can do in a piece of writing that is, say, 1,000 words long is radically different from what you can do in a piece that's 5,000 words long. So knowing sort of the confines of knowing how many words you've got to play with um, is again invaluable for sort of informing the kind of choices you'll make, how many examples you'll use, how detailed you'll be on certain points, etc. And then lastly, figuring out what argument you want to make. And I've talked about devising a thesis statement in my previous video, but knowing what case you're going to make influences the kind of material you're going to choose, it influences the examples. So having that in your head before you're planning out the structure of an essay is, to my mind, really, really useful and invaluable. With this, we then move on to the sort of the basic building blocks of an essay or a piece of academic writing. And fundamentally, there are three. Right? There is an introduction, there is the main body of the text in which you have your sort of main argument, your examples, all your sort of logic and arguing there, and then a conclusion. And there is a question of sort of how much time you allocate to each. The main body of the text wants to be sort of the bulk of your words, wants to be the bulk of your writing. And you need an introduction to set up sort of the topic, to set up your question. You need a conclusion to sort of capture what you've done in the essay, and to sort of point the way forwards for stuff you haven't done. And I'm going to talk about intros and conclusions and how you do good ones in my next video. But think about sort of how much space you're going to allocate to each, and indeed sort of what you're going to use each of them for. How many examples, how many topics do you want in the main body, and how will that inform how you introduce them and how you wrap them up. This leads us on to the main body and the real question of sort of essay structure. Assuming you're going to do an intro and a conclusion, as you should, is how you organise the main body, how you organise the examples, how you sort of have an argument that builds. And a good essay always builds. And to my mind, there are sort of three main ways you could do it. And this is not to say there are sort of these are the only options, but I think there are three ways that most pieces of academic writing will sort of stick to. So one is a kind of a chronological approach. If you're talking about a film or a book, or if you're talking about history, whatever, essentially moving forward in time, as it were. So the structure is obvious. There's a sort of a temporal flow. The first thing you discuss is the first thing that happened, and the last thing you discuss is the last thing that happened. And there is another option to do it sort of as a point by point. So you develop some main ideas, with a logical progression that those ideas build, and then you choose the examples that suit them. So I don't know, say an essay on sort of, I don't know, gender roles. And point one may be this particular character does something, and point two is talking about a text more generally, and then point three is talking about sort of society more widely. There's a logical build from that, from one person to all the people to sort of wider context, and there's a logical flow to that. And again, you can organise it sort of in that thematic dimension. And then there is a potential for a kind of a comparative approach almost. So logically, if you're talking about two different texts, two different ideas, is to sort of organise them that way. And there are sort of two main structures, I think, to do this. One is essentially main body, talk about all the stuff in block one or text one or idea one, then all the stuff in text two, idea two, and then bring them together and do a bit of essentially combining ideas or text one and two. And the other way is kind of the thematic approach, in which you talk about one theme and bring ideas one and two together to talk about the theme or the idea, and then move on to the next theme idea and talk about them again together, and so on. These are, I think, the main logical ways, and there's not one of them that is inherently better, but they're all different ways that sort of inform, and they emerge from the ideas, they emerge from the task, and so think about what makes most logical sense for your argument. And then following on from that, there are sort of questions of organisational logic. So looking at your examples, is there an obvious one to start? By which I mean, is there one that sort of enables you to build the argument? Is there one that sort of you need to lay the groundwork, so then points can lead into each other? Is there one that sort of essentially gives you that sort of obvious start point from which all the other examples stem? Is there one looking at the argument that sort of best supports the argument immediately? Are there ones that enable you to engage with the secondary literature more, which might be sort of more useful as you build? Think about all those sorts of things as you sort of plan where the pieces go. So there we go. These were some of my tips for essay structure and logic. Hopefully this has proved useful. And of course, if you have any ideas or thoughts about what to do yourself, please do comment them down below, as well as any ideas for future videos that would be useful. Make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, make sure to ring the bell so you know when my new videos are coming. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you all in the next one.